The night I thought my life was ending was the night someone else had already decided it was about to begin. Rain hammered against my face as I ran down the empty Brooklyn street, each breath tearing through my chest like sandpaper. My sneakers splashed through puddles that reflected the orange glow of streetlights, turning the pavement into a river of broken light. Behind me, somewhere beyond the curtain of rain, headlights swept across the road. I didn't need to turn around. I already knew who it was. My phone vibrated again inside my jacket pocket. The same message, the same threat, the same reason my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pulled the phone out while running and looked at the screen. 3 missed calls, 5 text messages. The latest one arrived seconds earlier. "You can't hide forever, Olivia." My stomach twisted. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and pushed harder. My legs burned. My lungs screamed. But fear was faster than exhaustion. 25 years old, and somehow my world had shrunk to this moment. Rain, darkness, running. Just 12 hours earlier, I'd been finishing my shift at the rehabilitation clinic, helping patients relearn movements most people took for granted. My biggest concern had been whether I could afford next month's rent without picking up another weekend shift. Normal problems, ordinary problems. Then everything changed. It always amazes me how quickly a life can split into before and after. A single day, a single choice, a single storm. Thunder rolled above the city as I turned onto a narrow side street lined with brownstones. Most of the windows were dark, families asleep, people safe inside warm homes while I ran through the rain feeling like the entire city had forgotten I existed. My wet hair stuck to my cheeks. My fingers were numb from cold. Every shadow looked dangerous. Every sound made my heart jump. Then I heard it, the low growl of an engine somewhere behind me. Closer now, much closer. Panic surged through me. I crossed the street without looking, nearly slipping on the slick pavement. A horn blasted somewhere in the distance. Tires hissed against wet asphalt. I kept running. Faster. Desperation carried me. Another block before my body started to give up. My breathing became ragged. My vision blurred from rain and tears. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the street, beneath a flickering streetlight, stood a man. Completely still. No umbrella. No rush to escape the storm. Just standing there as if the rain itself answered to him. Something about him felt wrong. Not dangerous. Not exactly. Just impossible. Like he didn't belong in the world around him. I slowed without meaning to. The closer I got, the stranger the sight became. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark coat. Hands resting calmly in his pockets. He wasn't checking a phone. Wasn't looking around. Wasn't trying to stay dry. He was simply waiting. For a second, an absurd thought crossed my mind. It looked like he had been standing there long before I arrived. As if he already knew I was coming. Then the headlights behind me rounded the corner, washing the street in white light. And for the first time, the man beneath the street lamp lifted his eyes and looked directly at me. The moment his eyes met mine, I forgot about the rain. I forgot about the cold. I even forgot about the headlights growing brighter behind me. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at me. Not curiosity, not surprise, recognition. As if he had opened a book and found the exact page he had been searching for. I stopped a few feet away, water dripping from my hair and jacket. My chest rose and fell with desperate breaths. "Please," I managed to say. "I need help." The man studied me for a second that felt much longer. His face remained calm, almost impossibly calm, despite the storm raging around us. Then the sound of a car door opening echoed down the street. My entire body tensed. I glanced over my shoulder and saw the familiar silhouette stepping out beneath the headlights. My stomach dropped. The fear returned all at once. "Olivia," he called from across the street. "We need to talk." I took a step backward until I realized the stranger was still standing behind me. The man approaching looked confident at first, but that confidence faded with every step he took closer. His pace slowed. His shoulders stiffened. Then he stopped completely. Rain rolled down his face as he stared past me. At the stranger. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The silence felt heavier than the storm. Finally, the stranger shifted his gaze away from me and looked directly at the man in the road. "You should leave," he said quietly. His voice was low and controlled. There was no anger in it. No threat. Somehow that made it even more powerful. The other man swallowed hard. I could see it from 30 feet away. "Sir," he said. Just one word. Yet hearing it made my pulse stumble. "Sir." The same man who had spent months trying to control every part of my life suddenly sounded nervous, respectful, almost afraid. The stranger said nothing else. He did not need to. A moment later, the man turned around, got back into his car, and drove away. I stood frozen in the rain, unable to process what had just happened. The street became quiet again except for the steady drumming of water against concrete. Then another sound emerged from the darkness. Engines. Several of them. Black vehicles appeared one after another from around the corner, moving slowly before stopping along the curb. The doors opened. Men stepped out wearing dark coats and tailored suits. None of them looked at me. Every one of them looked at the stranger. And every one of them seemed to wait for his permission before taking another step. The realization sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the weather. Whoever this man was, he carried a kind of authority I had never seen before. I turned back toward him. "Who are you?" I asked. His expression softened slightly, though not enough to make him seem less intimidating. Rain slid down the sharp lines of his face as he held my gaze. "My name is Damian Moretti." The name meant nothing to me, yet something in the way the men around him reacted told me it should have. Then he said the words that made my heart stop. "You should come with me, Olivia." My mouth went dry. "How do you know my name?" For the first time, something unreadable flickered behind his storm-gray eyes. "Because," he said quietly, "I have been looking for you longer than you can imagine." For a moment, I simply stared at him, convinced I had misunderstood. Rain continued to fall around us, soaking my clothes and turning the street into a blur of reflections, but all I could focus on was the man standing in front of me. Damian Moretti. A stranger who knew my name. A stranger who claimed he had been looking for me. Every instinct told me to walk away. To thank him for helping me and disappear before this night became even stranger. Yet the problem was simple. I had nowhere to go. My apartment was no longer safe. My phone kept vibrating with messages I no longer wanted to read. And the look in Damian's eyes told me he already knew more about my situation than he should. "I do not know you," I said, wrapping my arms around myself against the cold. "Then let me change that." His voice remained calm, controlled, like a man who never needed to raise it to be heard. One of the black SUVs pulled closer to the curb. The driver stepped out immediately and opened the rear passenger door. Nobody spoke. Nobody questioned him. The efficiency of it all made me uneasy. These were not employees. They looked more like people who had dedicated their lives to following his orders. I glanced toward the end of the street where the headlights had disappeared. Part of me wanted to keep running. Another part was exhausted. Emotionally, physically, completely exhausted. Damian seemed to notice the hesitation on my face. "You have been running for a long time tonight," he said. "You do not have to keep running." Something about those words hit harder than I expected. Maybe because they were true. I was tired of being afraid. Tired of checking over my shoulder. Tired of pretending everything was normal when it clearly was not. Thunder rolled across the city skyline. Somewhere nearby, a train horn echoed through the darkness. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Finally, I took a slow breath. "If I get in that vehicle, where are you taking me?" A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not amusement. Relief. Somewhere safe. Safe. The words sounded almost foreign. Before I could second-guess myself, I stepped toward the SUV. The warm air inside immediately wrapped around me. Soft leather seats. Subtle lighting. The faint scent of cedar and expensive cologne. It felt less like a vehicle and more like a private lounge on wheels. Damian entered a moment later and sat across from me. The door closed quietly. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, the silence felt heavier. I studied him carefully for the first time. Early 30s. Dark hair damp from the storm. Sharp features. Storm-gray eyes that seemed to notice everything. He carried himself with effortless confidence, the kind that could not be bought. "Have we met before?" I asked. For the first time, his expression changed. Just slightly. Something distant passed through his eyes. A memory, perhaps. Then he looked out the rain-streaked window. "No," he said quietly. "But 7 years ago, you changed my life." My heartbeat slowed, then accelerated all over again. Because somehow I knew he was telling the truth. And somehow I knew the answers waiting at the end of this ride were about to change mine too. The city drifted past the tinted windows in streaks of gold and silver light, distorted by rain and distance. I sat quietly, trying to make sense of the man across from me. Every answer he gave seemed to create 2 new questions. 7 years ago, you changed my life. The sentence repeated itself in my head like an echo. I searched my memory, hoping something would surface. A face, a name, a moment, anything. But there was nothing. I had never seen Damien Moretti before tonight. At least I did not think I had. The vehicle moved smoothly through Manhattan, leaving the crowded streets behind as the buildings grew taller and the traffic thinned. Nobody inside spoke. The silence was strangely comfortable and unsettling at the same time. Eventually I looked up. What happened 7 years ago? Damien's eyes shifted toward me. For a second I thought he might answer. Instead, he glanced back toward the window. That is a long story. I have time. A faint smile appeared. It vanished almost immediately. Not tonight. Frustration mixed with curiosity inside me. I hated mysteries, especially when I was trapped in the middle of one. The SUV turned through a pair of iron gates that opened automatically. My breath caught. Beyond them stood the largest private estate I had ever seen. The driveway curved through manicured gardens illuminated by soft lights hidden among the trees. Water fountains shimmered beneath the storm clouds. The mansion itself looked less like a home and more like something from an old movie. Stone walls, massive windows, warm golden light spilling from within. The vehicle rolled to a stop beneath a covered entrance. Before I could reach for the door handle, someone opened it from the outside. Another suited man. Respectful. Professional. Waiting. Always waiting. I stepped out and stared up at the building. The rain could no longer reach me beneath the stone overhang, but I still felt soaked from the night. You live here? I asked. Damien stepped beside me. Sometimes. As if owning a place this enormous was the most ordinary thing in the world. We entered through towering wooden doors. Warm air immediately surrounded me. The interior was breathtaking. Marble floors stretched beneath crystal chandeliers. Paintings lined the walls. A grand staircase curved upward toward a second floor I could barely see. Yet despite all the luxury, the house did not feel empty. It felt lived in, carefully maintained, almost protected. A woman in her 60s approached from a nearby hallway. Silver hair, kind eyes. She looked relieved the moment she saw Damien. Then her attention shifted to me. Surprise flashed across her face. Welcome, she said gently. You must be Olivia. I froze. Another person who knew my name. The woman smiled warmly. I am Margaret. If you need anything, you only have to ask. Need anything? The words sounded foreign after months of surviving everything on my own. Damien handed his coat to one of the staff and turned back toward me. For the first time since we met, I noticed something different in his expression. Not power, not confidence. Concern. Genuine concern. It appeared only briefly before disappearing again. You should get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we will talk. I wanted answers now. Instead, I found myself nodding. Margaret led me toward the staircase. Halfway up, I looked back. Damien was still standing in the entrance hall, watching. Not the way a powerful man watches a guest. The way someone watches something precious they thought they had lost forever. Sleep should have come easily after everything that happened, but my mind refused to slow down. I lay awake in a room larger than my entire apartment, staring at the ceiling while rain tapped softly against distant windows. The guest suite looked like something from a luxury magazine. A king-sized bed, a fireplace, fresh flowers on a table near the window. Everything was elegant. Everything was perfect. Yet I felt completely out of place. Around 3 a.m, I finally gave up on sleep and walked to the window. The storm had weakened. Manhattan glowed in the distance, its skyline shimmering beneath low clouds. Somewhere out there was the life I had known only yesterday. The clinic, my apartment, my routines. Somehow all of it already felt far away. I wrapped my arms around myself and thought about Damien. The way he watched me. The way he seemed to know things he should not know. Most of all, the way he had said he had been looking for me for years. None of it made sense. Eventually exhaustion won. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight filled the room. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then reality returned all at once. The mansion, Damien, the storm, the unanswered questions. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Margaret entered carrying a tray with coffee, fruit, and warm pastries. The smell alone made me realize how hungry I was. Good morning, Olivia, she said with a gentle smile. Did you sleep well? I laughed softly. Not really. Her expression suggested she had expected that answer. Mr. Moretti asked that you join him for breakfast when you are ready. My pulse immediately quickened. Breakfast. Somehow that sounded far more intimidating than running through a storm. 40 minutes later, I followed Margaret through a sunlit corridor lined with artwork and tall windows. The house looked completely different during the day. Less mysterious. More beautiful. Yet the feeling that I was walking through someone else's world remained. We entered a private dining room overlooking a garden. Damien sat at the far end of a long wooden table. A newspaper rested beside his coffee. He looked relaxed, but there was something about him that suggested he never truly let his guard down. When he saw me, he stood immediately. The gesture surprised me. Men like him were not supposed to stand when someone entered a room. At least not according to every stereotype I had ever heard. "Good morning, Olivia." His voice was calm as always. I took a seat across from him. "I am not sure there is anything good about this morning." To my surprise, he smiled. A real smile this time. Brief, but genuine. It transformed his entire face. For the first time, he looked less like an untouchable figure of power and more like a normal man. The moment disappeared almost instantly. "Fair enough," he said. We ate in silence for several minutes. The food was excellent. Fresh fruit, eggs, coffee far better than anything I usually bought on my budget. Yet my attention remained fixed on the man across from me. Finally, I set down my cup. No more avoiding the question. His eyes lifted to meet mine. What happened 7 years ago? The room became very still. Even the sounds from the garden outside seemed to fade away. Damien looked at me for a long moment before reaching into his jacket pocket. Then he placed something small and silver on the table between us. The second I saw it, my breath caught. Because I recognized it immediately, and I had not seen it in 7 years. For several seconds I could not speak. I simply stared at the object resting between us. A small silver keychain shaped like a star. The edges were worn smooth from years of handling. A tiny scratch crossed one side. I knew every detail because I had carried it almost every day when I was younger. "That is impossible," I whispered. My hand moved toward it before stopping halfway. Damien remained silent. He seemed content to let the memory find me on its own. Slowly, carefully, I picked it up. The metal felt cool against my fingertips. Suddenly, I was 17 again, standing outside a bus station on a freezing December afternoon, watching people rush past while snow fell from a gray sky. My mother had been gone for 6 months. My father had left years before that. Back then, life felt like an endless series of bad days stitched together by hope alone. I remembered sitting on a bench after finishing a volunteer shift at a community shelter. I had been exhausted, hungry, heartbroken, yet somehow still determined to help other people. A teenage boy had been sitting alone near the station entrance. Dark hair, torn jacket, head lowered. He looked lost, completely lost. I had never seen him before. I remembered buying 2 hot chocolates from a nearby cart. One for me, one for him. He had looked surprised when I handed it over. We talked for maybe 15 minutes. Nothing important. At least that was what I thought. The weather, school, dreams, life. Before leaving, I had taken the silver star keychain from my backpack and handed it to him. My lucky charm. The thing I carried whenever life became difficult. I still remembered what I told him. Sometimes people need a reminder that tomorrow can be better than today. The memory hit me so suddenly that my chest tightened. My eyes snapped back to Damien. "That was you." He nodded once. The room felt strangely quiet. "You were the boy at the station." "Yes." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. The image finally connected. The eyes, the voice, the feeling that I had seen him somewhere before. Time had changed him completely, but traces of that lonely teenager still remained. "I only spoke to you for a few minutes." Damien looked down at the keychain in my hand. His expression softened. "You were the only person who stopped." My throat tightened unexpectedly. I barely remember that day. A faint smile appeared. Not hurt, just understanding. I never forgot it. Sunlight streamed through the windows behind him, illuminating the silver star between us. For years I had assumed that moment disappeared into the past like countless others. A random act of kindness. A forgettable conversation. Yet somehow it had stayed with him all this time. Then his expression became serious again. The warmth faded. Concern replaced it. "Olivia," he said quietly, "there is something else you need to know." The change in his voice immediately made my stomach knot. I set the keychain down. "What is it?" Damien held my gaze for a long moment before answering. "The people searching for you yesterday were not the only ones asking questions about your life. The words settled over the room like a sudden drop in temperature. I stared at Damien, searching his face for some sign that he was exaggerating. I found none. He never seemed like a man who wasted words. What do you mean? I asked quietly. Damien folded his hands on the table. 3 weeks ago, someone began requesting information about you. My pulse quickened. Information from who? Your employer. Former landlords. Public records. People connected to your past. A knot formed in my stomach. That does not make sense. I am nobody. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Because Damien's expression changed immediately. You are not nobody, Olivia. The certainty in his voice caught me off guard. For a second, neither of us spoke. Sunlight spilled across the table between us, illuminating the silver star keychain. A reminder that the smallest moments could echo much farther than we ever imagined. Do you know who has been asking questions? I finally asked. Damien looked toward the garden outside the window. Not yet. Not yet. Somehow those 2 words worried me more than a direct answer would have. If a man like Damien Moretti did not know something, it meant the situation was far more complicated than I realized. My phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket. The sound made me jump. I had almost forgotten about it. Slowly, I pulled it out. Several missed calls. New messages. My chest tightened when I saw the name. The same person who had been trying to contact me for days. The same person who had turned my life into a constant exercise in anxiety. Damien noticed my expression immediately. You do not have to answer that. I stared at the screen before locking it and setting it face down on the table. I know. The strange thing was that for the first time in months, I actually believed it. The pressure that had followed me everywhere seemed weaker here. Distant. As if the walls around us kept more than rain and noise outside. Margaret entered carrying fresh coffee. Her timing was perfect. The tension in the room eased slightly. She smiled warmly before placing the cups in front of us. The weather finally cleared, she said. It is supposed to be beautiful this afternoon. After she left, Damien stood and walked toward the window. I watched him in silence. Powerful men were supposed to intimidate people. Damien certainly could. Yet every time I expected arrogance, I found restraint instead. Every time I expected control, I found patience. Why are you helping me? I asked. He remained facing the garden for several seconds before answering. Because someone once helped me when they had no reason to. My throat tightened unexpectedly. I looked down at the silver star in my hand. Back then, I had been a teenager trying to survive one difficult day at a time. I never imagined that simple act would matter years later. Then a black vehicle appeared at the end of the driveway. Another followed behind it. Damien's posture changed instantly. Not fear. Focus. The relaxed atmosphere vanished. He looked toward the entrance as one of his security men hurried across the courtyard. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Seconds later, the dining room doors opened. The guard stepped inside and looked directly at Damien. Sir, he said carefully, we found something this morning. The room became completely silent. Then the guard placed a photograph on the table. And when I saw the image, my heart stopped. It was a picture of me, taken only 2 days ago. My eyes locked on the photograph. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. It had been taken outside the rehabilitation clinic where I worked. I recognized the sidewalk, the coffee shop across the street, even the blue umbrella I had been carrying that morning. Whoever took the picture had been close enough to capture every detail. A cold sensation moved through my chest. Who took this? I asked. The security officer glanced at Damien before answering. We do not know yet. Damien picked up the photograph and studied it carefully. His expression remained controlled, but I could sense the tension beneath the surface. The same tension I had seen when the vehicles arrived at the estate earlier. When was this found? He asked. Less than an hour ago. The room felt smaller suddenly. The beautiful dining room, the sunlight, the peaceful garden outside. All of it seemed distant now. My attention remained fixed on the image. Someone had been watching me. Not yesterday. Not months ago. 2 days ago. Before the storm. Before I met Damien again. Before I even realized something larger was happening. There is more, the guard said quietly. He placed a small envelope on the table. Damien opened it immediately. Inside was another photograph. Then another. Then another. My stomach dropped. Different locations. Different days. Outside my apartment. Leaving work. Walking through a grocery store parking lot. None of the photos looked threatening. That somehow made them worse. Whoever collected them had been patient. Organized. Careful. Damien set the photographs down slowly. Leave us, he told the guard. The man nodded and disappeared without another word. Silence filled the room again. I stared at the collection of images spread across the table. Evidence of a life I never knew was being documented. Why would anyone do this? I whispered. Damien looked directly at me. Because they wanted information. About me? Yes. I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. I am a physical therapy assistant who spends most weekends catching up on laundry. There is nothing interesting about me. You are wrong. The certainty in his voice stopped me. Again, what do you mean? Damien leaned back in his chair. For the first time since breakfast began, he looked uncertain. Not afraid. Not hesitant. Just careful. Like someone choosing each word before speaking it aloud. 7 years ago, after we met at that station, I tried to find you. My pulse quickened. Why? Because you mattered. The answer arrived so simply that it caught me completely off guard. Outside, a breeze moved through the garden trees. Sunlight shimmered across the fountain beyond the windows. Everything looked peaceful. Yet inside me, questions continued multiplying. Damien's gaze never left mine. I searched for months, he said quietly. Then one day, you disappeared. My heart skipped. Disappeared? He nodded once. Every record connected to you vanished. School information, addresses, contact history. It was as if someone deliberately erased the trail. I stared at him in disbelief. The room felt silent again. Too silent. Then Damien reached toward the photographs and placed one in front of me. And now, he said, his voice lower than before, someone has started looking for you again. The words lingered between us long after Damien stopped speaking. Someone had started looking for me again. I stared at the photographs spread across the table, trying to understand how my ordinary life had somehow become the center of a mystery I never knew existed. Outside, the fountain continued its gentle rhythm. Birds moved through the garden. The world looked perfectly normal. Inside me, nothing felt normal anymore. Why would someone erase my records? I asked. Damien remained silent for a moment. That is the question I have been trying to answer for 7 years. 7 years. The number felt impossible. 7 years of questions. 7 years of searching. 7 years of carrying a memory that I had nearly forgotten. I looked down at the silver star keychain resting beside the photographs. Such a small object. Such a small moment. Yet somehow it had connected 2 lives across nearly a decade. I do not understand any of this, I admitted. Neither do I. Not completely. His honesty surprised me. Powerful people were supposed to have answers. Damien seemed to carry more responsibility than answers. Suddenly, my phone vibrated again. The sound felt louder than before. I glanced at the screen. Another unknown number. Another message. For a second, I considered ignoring it. Then I opened it. My breath caught instantly. There were only 6 words. We know where you are now. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Damien noticed the change in my expression immediately. Olivia. Without speaking, I handed him the phone. His eyes moved across the screen. The calm expression he usually carried disappeared. Not replaced by fear. Replaced by certainty. As though something he suspected had finally been confirmed. He set the phone down carefully. You are staying here. It was not an order. It was a decision already made. Strangely, I did not argue. Because for the first time, I felt the full weight of everything happening around me. The photographs. The missing records. The years of searching. The messages. None of it was random. None of it was ordinary. A soft breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of flowers from the garden below. I stood and walked toward the glass. The estate stretched across acres of perfectly maintained grounds. Security vehicles moved quietly along distant paths. Staff crossed the property with calm efficiency. Everything looked protected, stable, safe. Yet my reflection in the window looked uncertain, like someone standing between 2 lives. The one she knew, and the one she had not discovered yet. Behind me, Damien approached slowly. His reflection appeared beside mine in the glass. For a moment,